Good morning. We
Good
have
morning.
Good morning. It's like the Today Show
We're
here.
jumping right in there today.
yes, we are. We have with us as always Dr. Imani Price and Leon VanBibber, Mr. V. And today's topic, ladies and gentlemen, will be understanding trauma and its effects.
Yeah, we're going to be transforming pain to power.
Yes.
That is really what we want to talk about, because oftentimes the clients show up and most of our clients have experienced some level of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And we, of course, we deal with a lot of military, and females are our primary population. But this is a time for us really to kind of do some diving into that so that people can know that what it is, and then understand that there are some steps that one can take to work through that trauma and
Mm-hmm.
turn that pain into power. And I'll be saying that different times. I guess we'll all be saying that. But just real quick, what is trauma? It's an emotional response to a terrible event, and it's different for everyone.
Yes.
I've seen people who have experienced the same events, but they've had a different emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
And that's expected. So if you're with someone, it's a car accident or something, and you handle it different than the person who was in the accident with you, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We respond to these things differently. There are different types of traumas. We've got physical, emotional, developmental, and the complex trauma. And oftentimes our body has a physiological response to the trauma, fight or flight. And now is fight, flight, freeze.
Right.
And so there's a lot of different things that researchers are still learning about our response to the trauma. And of course, it leads to the physiological things of increased levels of stress hormones, such as cortisol and adrenaline. And then it impacts our immune system, the digestive and nervous system, and can lead to long-term health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to allow you guys to jump in and say what you've seen, your understanding of trauma and how it impacts people.
I think it's an important point that you make, that trauma affects everyone, because people have this perception that when you think of PTSD or trauma, that it's usually associated with military and it's usually associated with war, when it's actually, like you said, trauma can be anything that's either traumatic or distressing. It takes your life way out of context.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be important, because a lot of people think it's normal to have anxiety but not call it trauma.
Yeah, trauma definitely impacts folks differently, and also it's situational. And then for military personnel, is it a one-time event or is it a multiple-time event? Is it, complex chronic trauma?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? And
Right.
we think about the service member, but then also the families that get involved with that service member, because it really, there's a domino effect to trauma.
Absolutely.
So as we see service members, a lot of times they come in and, they're desperate. How do I, as I've said before, how do I turn down that noise? And we'll talk about desperation. And you can see it in their eyes. And a lot of times I'll ask, well, desperation is power.
Mm.
And then I'll ask, how desperate are you? And it clicks. They realize that they're not powerless, because desperation is power. And oftentimes I think people forget about that. You become desperate, you start looking for ways to heal. And a lot of times it starts with us here, at this level. They come to us,
Right.
and we see that desperation, and then it's that re-empowerment for them. So it's a different world we live in now with trauma. It's so dynamic and so many moving parts and pieces with that. And oftentimes, even as a therapist, we struggle. I know I struggle sometimes, because we see it so much, and because of technology, things change so much, and how we want to approach it. And something that is becoming more prevalent is moral injury and trauma.
Yeah.
We have people that have a very strong spiritual belief. And once that belief system becomes broken, that's a completely different,
Yeah.
uh,
Right.
yeah, it's just another aspect of that trauma.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely the emotional.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important point, Leon, that we acknowledge, because a lot of people who have mental health issues and it's related to trauma, acknowledging that trauma is also acknowledging a mental health issue. And a lot of people don't want to seem weak because they have the trauma or
yeah,
the stress. And you're right, it's not a weakness. Acknowledging it and giving it, a voice does give you power. Keeping it to yourself and keeping it locked in does bring on those physiological effects. And so instead of like I'm having a bad day because I got triggered, it is I have a headache or I have a backache or I'm not hungry or I feel, they'll acknowledge the depression sometimes, but they will not acknowledge the trauma because that means that it's real. And that
yeah,
scares a lot of people to say that what happened to me is real. But that's where your healing begins.
And I like that you said that it's not a weakness, because I was just thinking the same thing, that it's important that we bring this up,
Mm-hmm.
that many of the things that happen, especially to service members, but it could be to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
are absolutely abnormal. Most people would have some type of response,
Right.
negative response to the event.
Right.
So, yes, you get into a major car accident, I expect that there will be some response to it.
Right.
There's an assault that happens, I expect there would be some kind of response to it. You're in
Right.
combat, people are shooting over your head, and you see other things happening around you. There's an expectation that there would be some kind of response.
Mm-hmm.
So experiencing something that is absolutely out of the norm of what you would conceive in your mind and having a response to it is expected. It's not a weakness, it's
Mm-hmm.
being human.
It's normal. It's the polar opposite of if someone gives you a surprise birthday party and you're moved to tears or you're happy or you're joyful because that's a response to that happy event. But if you're in a traumatic or distressing situation and you break down, you cry or you get angry, those are normal responses to that situation. It's no different from that happy one to the one that takes your life out of context.
Absolutely. And some of the things that people see, the symptoms like flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety, depression, dissociation. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks will talk about feeling numbness. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't quite feel like myself. I don't know what I feel like. I feel like nothing. I feel absolutely numb. All
Right.
of those things are also part of it. Those are symptoms that we often see and people talk about. So it's not abnormal if
Right.
you're experiencing those kinds of things. It's just a sign that something out of your norm has happened to you.
Right. I think it's also important to acknowledge for men and women, but more so for women, those night sweats sometimes are not your perimenopause or your menopause kicking in. Sometimes you're having trauma dreams and you're having those that fearful reaction because that's the only time you allow your brain to kind of process it when you're not trying to consciously control not remembering. So in your sleep, you're going into those trauma sweats. And that's one of those physiological reactions that you need to take note of. Sometimes, yes, it can be menopause, but for men and women, that's one of the signs you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
yeah, we start talking about the men and women, especially in the military, and uh, wanting to recognize that trauma, like you said, owning it, admitting to it, and a lot of times the fear from that is not just the response they receive from it, but also their career and how
Mm-hmm.
that affects them that way as well. I've got this clearance, and I hear that quite a bit with, man, I've got this secret clearance, and with people having clearances, um, that in a lot of cases really stifles that process because they're so in fear of that job because that's what they know, that they don't want to pull the trigger on that. And a lot of times you'll see military personnel, the ones that do come for therapy, they're seeking outside the military. So
Yes.
they're going into community care.
Right.
And it's, plenty of them have showed up and they're like, I'm here because I don't want anybody on post or in my unit to know that I'm doing this. And at least it's a step, right? You're
Yes,
here.
absolutely.
We're now doing
Yes.
something. Um, and the military is evolving and changing in regards to, hey, it is okay to go seek help. However, there are some of those places that uh, the old school thought of thinking and training, they do keep, military personnel kind of on the teeter-totter with that. So I think it's important that we find a way to connect with those folks and, hey,
Mhm.
it's okay. Don't
Yeah,
worry about
it's
that clearance. We're
absolutely.
we're gonna we're gonna get through that clearance. You know, what we talk about here stays here. It's kind of like Fight Club, right? What happens in Fight
Mhm.
Club stays in Fight Club. No one needs to know. And it's that type of understanding that really resonates with military personnel. It's that connection and us being able to get them to understand that. And then you watch that smile on their face, and it's very empowering to them because now all of a sudden that light bulb's on. Oh, no one's going to hear about this. Not unless you want to tell them, but it's a safe space here. This is for you. So,
Yeah, that's a good point. Seeking help, and not just tucking it away because it means that I'm weak, or not acknowledging because I'm going to lose something.
hmm
It's almost like you make that security clearance, or for the civilian person, you make that secret something that's more powerful than your overall mental and physical health. When you make that decision to not acknowledge it, not get help, you give it negative power instead of empowering yourself.
Right, because the unresolved trauma can lead to definitely the development of various mental health issues, of course, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and substance use
Right,
by not addressing it.
right.
And many of those things may happen as a way of coping or as a result of the overwhelming emotion that you may experience, but it's a bigger thing to not get have it addressed than it is to address it.
hmm I like you the self medicating. So for that person who is wondering why their family member is always drinking or
hmm
smoking, or sometimes even spending, or quick to anger, some of these things are trauma responses, and that
Mm,
person, their unacknowledged trauma, or they're again tucking it away in a corner and not addressing it. Though some of those symptoms is that person having that reaction they don't want to have, and you gently coaxing, sometimes going in with them
yeah.
to get help can be very helpful.
yeah, I see a lot of, you started talking about these trauma responses, whether it's alcohol or spending. And spending, that's you say that, and um, that's a real thing. And it's not the highest on the list, but I've noticed it becoming more of a thing. And
Yeah.
the common answer I receive about that, well, we'll talk about, well, why are we spending? Because I feel like I'm on borrowed time. I don't know how much longer I have,
Mhm.
and I want to do it all right now because tomorrow's not promised. You know, um, but they're spending so much that they're putting themselves in a financial crisis,
Mhm.
and they're trying to find ways to pick up that slack. So that becomes then, an even bigger topic. So as I've started to see this trend, um, it's something that I think needs to start being paid attention to a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, you
absolutely.
know, we've gone through and still are going through, the opioid crisis. Um, and that's a very real thing, especially from active duty. Because from active duty, a lot of it starts there with the medication, right? Because
Yes.
it's all about staying in the fight. Um,
Mm,
and I'm a prime example of that. And I'm not afraid to tell anybody about that. When you are constantly on missions and you're doing things and they want to keep you in the fight, the quick fix is here. You know what? Start with, take this. And a lot of times soldiers, airmen, Marines, they don't. They don't really know what they're taking at the time. They're just, hey, you know what? I feel better and I'm still moving. But
Mm-hmm.
that medication then becomes the addiction without even knowing it's becoming the addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And that medication is not just great for pain, but it's also self-soothing. So it does a lot of things to that person.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we've traded one problem for another.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something else I think as caregivers and therapists, and if anybody that's watching this is active duty, you know, take a look at that before we start that process, because now you are now just truncating this issue. Now we're dealing with addiction, and now we're still dealing with the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that
Another, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Dr. A.
I was just gonna say another perspective from working in the jails. A lot of the people there have such traumatic backgrounds, and it's so normalized to them that they don't consider I'm in this place because I have this trauma background. They just think of it as a part of life or as a part of, like a family heirloom. My dad went in, my brother went in, my mom went to jail, and so it's normal for me, but that's not normal. That's almost one of those trauma responses where their life becomes negatively affected because no one's addressing the trauma, either in their family or for that person.
Yeah. And I was thinking as you guys were talking, the medication does not substitute for dealing with the thing that caused you to take the medication.
Right.
We cannot substitute, I don't care what, even if it's a psychotropic medication, we can't substitute that for coming and doing the work to help understand and hopefully start to get through
Mm-hmm.
the thing that caused you the trauma response in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important because relationships are so impacted, and most of us have people we care about,
Mm-hmm.
but not working with or working through your trauma impacts all of your relationships,
Mm-hmm.
even the one
Yeah,
you have with yourself.
Right. The
And
most
that
important.
is so important, absolutely, because of the
absolutely.
fear and the mistrust,
Right.
because of maybe the substances, the sometimes it's the erratic behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
It is so many things.
Right.
So dealing with the trauma is it's essential to having the life that you want, and help is available, and help is also effective.
Right. Very
And it
effective.
may look different ways, and it may take time.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that it may have been one event that caused this to happen to you emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
but working through those layers, it may not be as simple. So I
Right.
always encourage people to give us some time.
Right.
Let us work through this, because we've got to work on this and this and this. We've got to often work through layers.
Right. And getting help, I think people think I need to go in and to tell the stranger my deepest, darkest secrets. Maybe you start with a group, a therapeutic group, but maybe you start, excuse me, with a group. And then within that group, when you get comfortable with that form of therapy, maybe then you can transition to individual therapy.
Yeah.
But at least it's a start somewhere. Again, acknowledging and giving it power, and not
Yes.
just taking medication, thinking that medication is going to erase all my flashbacks, my night sweats, my triggers, and it's not. You got to start somewhere.
And Dr. Price, you're so right. You talk about layers. You
Mm-hmm.
know, this is an onion, and we are peeling back those
Oh
layers.
my gosh,
Yes.
yes.
And there are so many layers to a person that oftentimes you're pulling back multiple layers, and you're like, man, this is like a blooming onion here, and I'm just trying to get to the center, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And Dr. A, you talked about group, and I will tell you, group is probably one of the most empowering tools you can help somebody with, because you're right, a lot of them don't want to come forward. But then when they get into that group and they're able to bring up something that's happened, and the person directly across from them goes, me too. They're not
Right.
alone anymore. It's that. And then all of a sudden, the whole room's talking and
Mm-hmm.
conversating about that. And now all of a sudden, you've got 12 people that felt like they were alone. That 12 people now are empowered with each other
Right.
and
Love
understanding
that.
that, hey, this is something we can do. So I
Yeah,
think it's important that if you don't want to come to it individually, we all understand that. Maybe that's just not the initial route, but coming to group is empowering,
Hmm.
and having everybody there as that collective new family, uh, it
Hmm.
really resonates with a lot of folks. So you talk about those layers, Dr. Price, and I just think of that onion, and I'm just watching it peel back and being able to get to those folks.
Hmm.
building community. It's
Yes.
so important that part of the healing involves community, and it community can look different ways. Community can be me and one battle buddy, or it could be me and 15 battle buddies, or me and 3 battle, whatever it is. But the isolation doesn't help with the healing.
Right.
So anyone who's isolating right now, understand that sometimes people can be aggravating. We hear that all the time. Sometimes I feel
Hmm.
that. But what we don't want you to do is to be out there doing this on your own. There's you don't have to do it. And it is easier when we come together and collectively love on and support one another.
Hmm.
And that's through individual counseling group or just getting involved in something that helps you to see your worth and your purpose
Right.
and how you can move through this.
Hmm.
So then there's different ways, but real quick, some of the holistic ways, Dr. Austin and Mr. V, the mindfulness, meditation, yoga,
Hmm.
use of art and music therapy.
Hmm.
There have been so many forms of treatment and complementary treatments that people are using. So, what say you?
Yeah, sometimes massages. It's very interesting when people say, I went to my massage therapist and she hit a point and I started crying. But
Ooh.
that's maybe where you stored your trauma. Again,
Mm.
that somatic response or that physiological response because you refuse to talk about it. But massages or walking if you can't run, or just um, gardening, getting your hands in the soil, those are some ways that you can begin the process if you think and let your mind process through some of those things while you're walking or gardening or talking to someone in those groups. Those are good ways to begin the process as well.
Yeah, there's lots of alternatives out there now. Um, and as we deal with our clients, that's where what are your hobbies? What
Hmm.
interests you that we can really start to hone in on that they can now start to use as a way to medicate without medicating, right?
Mhm.
And I've had plenty of folks that are like, oh, I like to hike or I like to go outdoors. And I had a client this past week that went bungee jumping with uh, another foundation. And she's like, it was empowering. She's like, I jumped and she goes, and I was scared. She goes, but after I did it the first time, she goes, it was like I was set free. I'm like, huh. She goes, and then I did it again backwards. I was like, well, good for you. So,
Now that's some bad
but
stuff right there.
it,
That's high level.
yeah, I was like, good on you because I don't know that I could have done that. But my point is as we get to know our clients and we know who they are, we can start to point them in those directions because a lot of them come in with, oh, I'm not going to go do any meditation. I'm not doing yoga because they don't connect with it, and that's fine. So we start talking about things that they do connect with, and I
Mhm.
promise you, there's a group out there that has something for you. Now all of a
Right,
sudden we make that connection.
right.
Um, So I think that's important. We find that connection, and there's always going to be some sort of alternative, whether it's horseback riding, hiking,
Oh, yeah.
boating, fishing. There's so many things.
Mhm.
And, something that, and I know we're getting close here on time, ladies, but something I always like to tell people, here at Women's Inner Fitness, you have a voice and you matter.
Yes.
And if you're watching this, come see us because you're
Right.
going to find that you have a voice and that you matter. And we're going to turn that volume down. And we're going to get you hopefully to where you want to be.
Hmm.
But it's all about being able to make that connection so you're not alone.
No. And it's individualized.
Yes.
So we have a lot of ideas and things that we would suggest for individuals as we're on this healing journey, but it's going to be different for everybody. So if you're a walker, you're a hiker, you like boating, fishing, yoga, whatever it is, we're going to encourage you to do that. And if we need to help find a group or some kind of way to facilitate that for you, then yes, we want to do that. Because I think that that the healing, the counseling part is one side of it.
Right.
But there's all these other parts that go into it also. And all of that is part of the healing circle, not just the one thing.
Right. I think that's important. I think people think I have to go in just for therapy, but therapy and therapeutic interventions are more than just talking about it and more than just medication. There's so many things you can do to address it if you just start somewhere. That's the important part.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are one of you guys' favorite things to do when you're stressed and it helps you to get some steam off or just to focus your energy in a different way?
I will go outside and pick weeds. Or like I said, you've heard me say before, I'll go outside and just take a deep breath of fresh air. If I'm stressed, just to like Lance said, to bring down those moments, just to stop in my day and acknowledge I am stressed or I am overwhelmed. And it's okay. Breathe.
Yeah, Mr. B.
I totally agree with Dr. Alston. I go outside. Sometimes I will just start cutting the grass, or I'll 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 wash a car. I don't know why I like washing cars. I don't know. It's something about
You need to come to my house and wash your truck.
it's the yeah. I got one of those outside I'm dealing with now. But I think it's that process sometimes of cleaning the vehicle and taking it from being dirty to being pristine. And a lot of times I'll relate with even myself, hey, it's dirty or it's been through it. I need to clean it back up. So I clean that truck and I get back in it and I feel renewed in ways. And for a lot of folks in the military, cars are their thing. It's like, how many times have we been in the we've been in the military and everybody's showing up with a new car, right? It's like, if I can get a car, they want to keep it clean. So I think cars are a great way to connect, as well as being outside. Those are my two things, anyways.
Well, I'm a meditation person. I'm a yoga meditation person. But what I hear the two of you saying with pulling the weeds and washing the cars is that there is a accomplishment that happens.
And there it is.
So what you guys are doing and what many people like, and she jumped, she did the bungee jump.
Yeah.
There's an accomplishment that happens. And all of that is so empowering.
Yes.
Cleaning your garden. My mother does our gardening here, but it can be very satisfying to see an outcome that's positive, something different. So I'll just say as we wrap up, whatever your thing is, whatever your hobbies are, whatever thing you believe would help you to feel accomplished, we encourage and invite you to do it. Because this healing journey, it has many different layers to it. And we want you to be healing. Even if you're not dealing with a traumatic event, just for overall wellness and well-being, it's important to have something that you do that takes you out of your everyday norm and gives you a different perspective, something new to look at, something else to incorporate into your wonderful day. So for the three of us, this is the Empowered Mind. Thank you for joining us. We ask you to like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything that you want to share with us, please put it below in the comments. And until we see you next week, God bless you and keep you. And God bless you guys and keep you too. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.